Hello and welcome to perhaps my favourite day of the week. It is indeed Monday and it is a Moriarty the Patriot breakdown once more. I am Clockwork Noodles. Hello and thank you for tuning in. This week's episode is episode 9, A Study in S part 2, our finale. Before I go into our breakdown, I'll let you guys know that this week's breakdown is going to be a bit more of a technical breakdown. I don't really have a great deal of history to talk about this week. I've got a lot of things to talk about composition-wise, a lot of things to talk about technical-wise, what are they doing music-wise, to what effect are they trying to achieve, and how well are they doing it. Before I get into our breakdown, let's quickly do the boring bit first. I have a video of Winter 2021 coming up on the 10th. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel to find out what animes I am watching next season. What am I tearing apart? Is there another title that might replace Moriarty the Patriot in its level of genius? I think so. I think there's something out there which might fit the bill quite nicely until the next part of season 1 comes out for Moriarty the Patriot. Also, in that video, you will see me name my top 3 anime of fall 2020. What is the king of anime in my eyes? What was my favourite anime of this season? So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Also, make sure you guys subscribe to the Discord channel. It's going to be quiet for a little bit until we get bigger as a channel, but it will be a place where you can ask any questions and you simply get a notification sent to your phone whenever a video goes up on YouTube. You will never miss any of my breakdowns. Let's get to it. We open straight back into the case where Sherlock is being escorted back out by the Lestrade and the team. We do catch Sherlock acting a little bit weird. He says that looks odd as he's looking down at the floor. And I did write, as you guys know with my notes, I have written tracks. Is he looking down at the tracks? Yes, he is. I didn't have quite the right reason why he was looking at the tracks. The next fun little bit is where Sherlock asks Lestrade to let him escape. He's going to promise Lestrade to give him all the credit, but he wants to solve this case. And it's nice to see that Lestrade doesn't believe it's Holmes. He knows it's not Holmes, and he is convinced that Holmes is an innocent man. I think we can give Lestrade some kudos this episode. We see him kind of yanking on the reins to spook the horse, and it ends up lurching the carriage, where Sherlock is able to escape. The note last week that we saw Sherlock give to Watson wasn't what I figured it would be, so they have taken a little deviation from the book, but it in fact was a note to Watson to tell him to meet up and that Lestrade would actually help them. Sherlock believed in Lestrade, and obviously the relationship between those two is always one of respect, but at the same time we do see Sherlock in the books often mocking Lestrade, but it is always a relationship where they will come through when they need to come through. Sherlock does give Watson a chance, so he does go, are you sure you want to help me? It's quite nice to see him giving Watson a choice. Do you really want to help me? The response is a typical Watson response, and I absolutely love the portrayal of Watson in this. It's nice to see the portrayal of Watson, us delving into Watson as a character a little bit more this episode. I do like the job they have done on him. The response is, of course, otherwise I'm going to have to pay all the rent myself. Absolutely love it. Sherlock then says we're going to set a trap to lure in the culprit using this ring. The culprit has dropped the wedding ring. It's very, very important to our culprit, and Sherlock knows that the culprit is going to come back. And we get a scene change. We actually see Hope, or his name is Jefferson Hope, and he is telling Fred, the man of the episode who I want to talk about, he's telling Fred that he dropped that ring. And we know that from last week that our culprit is terminally ill. He doesn't have a lot of time left in him. We know that the ring must be very valuable to him because he says it doesn't matter and I must get it back. And maybe you guys also did it. I started to figure out what the story on the other side was. So obviously we are following this case from Sherlock's perspective, but with little bits and pieces coming through, with the noble being the victim and obviously William being behind the plan, I started to try figuring out what the scene would have played out from his perspective. A little bit later on, I'm going to essentially set you the scene and try and put it back, but I did do quite a good job in my head of trying to recreate the scene from the other side. Sherlock ends up with his lure being set, and we do see an ad placed in the Lost and Found column of the newspaper. It simply reads that a lost ring was found at the certain location. Nicely underneath it says Dr. John Watson. It's going to start tying Watson to Sherlock. Fred sees Sherlock with Watson this episode. William is now aware of Watson. I don't know where the manga's going, and obviously I don't know the stories up ahead, but there was a time in the books and even in the movies as well where Moriarty actually uses Watson and his relationship to Sherlock. He uses it against him, so gonna be interesting to see if Watson is now putting himself out there in danger. William reads the ad. So it comes from William himself, and Albert reappearing. I've got a few reappearances of our boys now. I haven't seen Albert for a little bit of a while now. Albert is the one who's realizing that there is a trap. So even Albert has picked up on it. He says, "Are you sure we should send Fred?" My little notes here, will Sherlock even realise this? But obviously it doesn't play out quite like I was predicting it would. So I was just imagining Fred waltzing up to the door going, "Hi, it's my ring." And I'm like, I don't think that's going to work. Thankfully, that wasn't what we got. And we got something one hell of a million times better than what I was imagining. We do get introduced to the Baker Street irregulars. We've seen Moriarty and his band of men. We've seen all of the men at his disposal. We finally get to see some more tools that Holmes has. And the Baker Street irregulars are a gang of orphans, or street urchins as he likes to call them. There is a knockoff, guys. I need to quickly circle this guy. This guy right here. It's Albert. It's like a failed Albert, or he wants to be Albert. He looks like Albert so badly. These guys end up running errands, they find items, they basically make themselves useful. Holmes even says they are more reliable than the police. See, I told you last week that people didn't really trust the police a great deal. A little fun thought, it's almost a shame that the Baker Street irregulars were not around when William and Lewis were out on the streets. Could you imagine them all ganging up and trying to run errands for the sake of good? A little underlying fact in this anime is all about circumstances. What if William and Lewis had been treated better? What if they had been put into this gang with the irregulars? Would they still be scheming murderers that they are now? Very interesting questions. A lot of this stuff does make you think about things like circumstances. The name inside the ring reads Lucy. Isn't an aristocratic ring by the design itself, and it is Watson who is looking at the ring at this point. And this is where I tried to figure it all out from the opposite perspective. Obviously, we know what happened in the end, and I do go through it, but this was my little attempt before I had any more of the information. I said that the culprit's wife has died, so maybe she was murdered by the noble. When it comes to this kind of things, and whenever William's involved, it's always a bad noble. So I said, I bet the noble is a bad guy, that this guy now has nothing to live for. He's lost all his reasons to live because he must have really loved his wife. Thus, he now wants to kill the noble. That's why he decides to work with William and become his pawn. Obviously, this isn't too far from what is the case. It was just me trying to have a stab at trying to read it as if we were seeing it from Will's point of view and what that situation over there would be like. He only really gets involved when there's a really bad noble. So I was like, what could this man have done? And thankfully we do get that answer a little bit later on. Watson starts to recall Sherlock's deductions where the culprit's fingers are bigger than the murdered Drebber or the Count Drebber. He says, I'm looking for a large man. When there is a knock on the door, and lo and behold, we see an old woman. Oh, this is actually so damn creepy. Fred this episode is bloody creepy. He really is bloody creepy. And I'll talk about it a little bit more in the next few scenes with Fred. And my goodness, Fred, really in an amazing voice. This guy, I'm going to start drawing some ideas about the backstory of Fred. Obviously, if you do know, do not say anything. Anime only here. Becca likes to try and work things out, and that is what I'm doing. And I'm having fun with it as well. He says that the ring belongs to my daughter Lucy, and I know that the name is inside the ring, where it was dropped around number 3, and she was married last year, and her husband would be mad if he finds out that she's lost the ring. That little fake little story that he gives doesn't quite add up. Fred says that he drops it outside of the house. Well, obviously, this ring was found inside. Fred mentions the daughter, and, well, the daughter's definitely dead. And you guys might be wondering, how do you know? We haven't said that yet, although it is quite heavily hinted at. Have a look at this section. Have a look at this picture. And yes, I'm going to be drawing your attention to the flowers in that vase. The flowers in the vase are a white lily. White lilies are often found at funerals. They represent death, the passing of somebody, serving as a visual, subtle hint that Lucy is no longer in the same world. Watson gives the ring up. I don't know why it frustrated me so much to see him give it up, but obviously it's all part of the plan and it's fine. Nice enough, we see a very wet, soggy Sherlock, the best kind of Sherlock, trailing this old woman. I've even put, is he leading him into a trap? This next scene, this next sequence is absolutely fantastically shot. It is a really nice scene of these back alleys. I think it's quite ironic. If I can tell you guys what the weather I've had all day here in the UK, it has been foggy. And I mean thick pea soup foggy out there. And I've been at work all day. I couldn't tell you what the weather was because it was just so foggy. There was no sunlight. It was dark. It was creepy. It looked like Silent Hill, and it still looks like Silent Hill out there. So it's really ironic that we're getting this episode showing the foggy nature of the UK because it is so foggy out there. And this sequence is really damn pretty, and back alleys which look really dark and dirty. You kind of feel like you're going to get shanked if you go down there. A little word there for you guys that often gets used up north. And this sequence is absolutely beautiful. The audio cue. The old woman, aka Fred, just stands there and then turns to walk. And we hear the audio cue of a bucket being dropped. Sherlock then drops down from the alleyway. We get to see some of those boxing moves that Sherlock knows. Sherlock punches this old woman. We hear the shattering. And I was like, oh, that's how he did it. Fred has a mask on, and it must be a porcelain mask or something, and it just looks so fucking creepy. It really looks so creepy. I hate it. He's about to do the face reveal on Fred. That moment when Fred flips Sherlock over his shoulder. And I'm just like, damn, Fred, what the hell? Fred is tiny. I can't imagine what his official height is. He must be something like my height, and I'm about 5'5". It's the next point when he parkours up a wall onto a coach and then up onto a roof. I mean, it might just be a case of anime physics, but Fred, what the hell? It's nice that we also see Watson appearing at this point. That is actually the coach that Fred ends up bouncing off of. This whole sequence with Fred dressing up in the black cape and he looks like this kind of Grim Reaper. Creepy enough. I'm going to start making a few hedging my bets that Fred either has a theatrical past behind him or he's part of a escaped circus or something because he's so acrobatic. Something like that is going to be part, I think. But don't tell me, guys. I'm going to figure it out and wait for the anime to give it to me. I think there's something about Fred that is going to be so fun to find out and when we do get a backstory for him. Blimey! I think he was the character who shocked me the most this episode. Seeing him flipping Sherlock, who is a great deal taller than him, right over his head. And then the parkouring, just to this point, we have seen Fred now playing 3 different characters. So obviously he was the drowned woman, and then he was the man who was killed on the boat, and now he is this guy, this old woman. Is there no end and no limits to how good Fred is at his cosplay game? Fred is beating me at the cosplay game and is putting me to shame. Sherlock does recognise that his culprit or the mastermind has one up over him. So he does admit that he is slightly at a disadvantage. Moriarty's can have one there. And he also knows, this one goes to Sherlock, that Fred is one of the mastermind's men. And he says there is an organisation, a group of men. So he recognises that Fred is not the culprit. We see a sad Watson who is really sad because he's given up the ring. And that is when Sherlock basically says that this case is all but solved. Sherlock knows who has killed the Count. But this is our halfway point anyway in the anime. Sherlock is a very clever man, and now to see the unravelling of how he figured out that it was indeed Jefferson Hope. The halfway point is Watson. And this flower, you know me, I still give you guys a flower breakdown. The flower is the English wallflower. You guys might have heard of a wallflower, often meaning someone who is introverted, a little bit shy, people who don't actually dance at social events. But the most important thing to figure out what this actual flower means and why it fits Watson, it is faithful in adversity. Somebody who stays strong in times of struggle. And even though technically we see him waver this week, that is Watson's character. I can always say that Watson is definitely loyal to doing the right thing. He's loyal to his convictions. Him and Sherlock, we do get to see that as well, where he kind of hugs him later on in the episode. Just his relationship with Sherlock, nicely stated here with the flower and how he is. He's a very faithful man. The colour they're using the orange wallflower, and this can mean optimism, encouragement, warmth and fun. I definitely think this fits his character quite nicely. We end up at the Little Dorrit pub. Has Sherlock really figured out this case? And oh my god, my blessed boy, he's a blessed bean, he really is. It's just this very cute moment where he goes to drink a pint and he ends up with the beer moustache. It is a really cute moment. But guys, let me take a break to introduce you to this guy. This guy right here. Sherlock really reminds me of me, and I don't like it. It's horrible. It's too scary. It's too similar. This face, this stalker creeper in the window who comes and knocks and goes, hey, come with me. This next sequence, leading from this next sequence all the way to the end, is just perfection. There's now a lot going on when it comes to the composition, the camera, and I'm going to break it down. I'm going to break down a bit of music as well when it comes to it. 10 out of 10 for this next sequence. We find out that Lestrade has checked Drebel's past, and I've even put, he calls him a incomparable philanderer, and he has got a very nasty habit of molesting women, and mainly the women who are of lower standing than himself. So he's using his status to do unscrupulous things to people who are below him, who can't actually have a voice, especially when it comes to women at this period of time as well. That is when he says that one situation stands out from the rest, and it was an exception to the rule. And we know that Sherlock is always looking for that one piece of information that stands out, that one little bit which doesn't fit the rules, and this is it. And I love the way that they do some visual storytelling. We get a stained glass window, and it basically tells us all we need to know. There was a man, and this man was Jefferson Hope. He married a woman named Lucy Fernier. She ends up going missing, and her body comes back covered in bruises. He figured out that Jefferson Hope has killed the Count, as obviously for revenge for his beloved Lucy. And then he says, as well, the driver of this cab is Jefferson Hope. That was just so unexpected when it just pans up. And it is that smile, that grin on Hope's face. I'm going to say it right here. I really like the artwork, the design for Jefferson Hope. I love that beard, that facial hair is beautiful. I really like his design. Kudos for putting in that level of effort into a side character. This is just absolutely amazing. And it is now the unraveling of the case. Sherlock even gets really excited and he's like, aren't you excited? This is you don't often get a chance to ride a carriage being driven by a murderer. This is a one-off experience, guys. So, right back at the start, when Sherlock took note of something outside the house, it was indeed the tracks. He noticed that all of the houses on this street belonged to noblemen, so most of them would own a four-wheeled two-horse carriage. I think we've seen one used by Albert. Albert has one right at the start. But in front of the Count's house, he saw smaller tracks, a narrow cab. And he makes a fair point that nobody would hire a cab to go and do a murder because you get seen. Can you imagine telling your Uber driver, hey, just drop me off here. I'm going to be back in a minute. I've got to go kill someone. Coming back covered in blood again. Going, hey, I'm going to give you a 5-star rating. Just take me home. Don't quite think it works like that. The culprit must therefore drive the cab. He must be able to drive a cab. And that is when we see what the Baker Street irregulars have been up to. They were set the task to go find a cab driver with pudgy fingers, so big, large man. It also had to be a man who was seen around the Count's house on the day of the crime. And that led us to Jefferson Hope. Sherlock then manages to trigger Hope, and it's very, very clever, where Sherlock asks Hope, why did you kill Grebber in such a coarse manner? Surely the plan would have been for you to have been more elegant and a bit more careful. And this triggers Hope. I will mention at the end, I think something like this is going to be William's undoing. And it's just because there's one teeny tiny thing that William can't control. And we see it right here. Hope gets triggered, and he even says, yes, the plan was supposed to be carried out with more finesse. As soon as he came face to face with Drebber, the murderer of his beloved, anger takes over. We get a red filter. You guys know what the red filter means. The red filter this time isn't really being used to signify the blood or the murder or the danger. I think there's one thing that stands out as more important in this sequence: anger. Red is an angry colour. People often say that people who drive red cars drive faster. I have a red car, I don't speed, so I'm going to disprove that one. I believe the red filter here is showing us a actual raw emotion, and that is pure, unadulterated anger. The anger he felt when he came face to face with a murderer. Human emotion took over, and he couldn't remain level-headed when he came face to face to a killer. Thus, the way he carried out the actual murder itself was very slapdash. Hope then tells Sherlock, I want to make a deal. And we get an amazing scene change. And this scene change is the one I want to talk about the most. That fog is back, and it really creeps me out because of how foggy it's been outside lately. We get a scene change to a very cold, foggy blue graveyard. You know me, guys, I'm the creepy girl who really likes studying graveyards. Can't really tell you too much about this one because we do appear to be on the entrance of a graveyard. It could be Highgate. I don't quite think it is Highgate. Highgate is a tiny bit more fancy on the outside. Stereotypical Victorian graveyard. It looks good. The blue showing us how cold the situation is. The fog, everything is now concealed. Everything is hidden. Everything is hiding away. I think these are ravens, but it could also be a crow. Both Raven and the crow are very intelligent birds, and I think there's a reason why they've chosen ravens and crows. Note that the ravens and the crows are all around, and they are seen around the cemetery, all watching and taking everything in. Watson tells Hope that you have to turn yourself in. He tries to plead to any remaining humanity that he has, because he tells him, you've got your revenge, you've set out, you've got your goal, turn yourself in. I thought it was his heart, but I'm not so sure if it is his heart. But he ends up coughing up blood. I mean, that could be tuberculosis. That could be a number of things. I don't know if I cut it out or not. I might have cut it out. But there was a point a bit earlier with the children on the streets, and I think it was in relation to Lewis, when obviously Lewis on the streets has a cough. Victorian period, disease was absolutely rife. So this man could have a number of things going on with him, where he even says, I don't have long left. I may as well already be dead, and that's why I've given my life to my benefactor, aka William. The deal. So what is this deal? And this really, really twisted deal. Sherlock is to kill Jefferson. He wants death at his hands because he's impressed at how he's managed to work out all of Trevor's wrongdoings. This entire sequence is watched over by our King Creep, or King Freak, if we want to go for a bit of a Rob Zombie kind of feel there, by our hooded figure, Fred. Fred is bloody creepy, okay? Moran is sexy, Fred is creepy. So he has to kill Hope, and then Fred will tell Sherlock who Hope's benefactor is. Fred is going to tell Sherlock, the benefactor is Moriarty. They want Sherlock to fall down almost to Moriarty's level to bring him down to their level of having blood on his hands. They want to see if Sherlock will go as far to kill somebody. Will Sherlock go as far as they do to get what they want? And that is when we get a complete polar opposite visual. We get the red, the orange, harsh fire, and we have Moriarty standing in front of the fire. This is a contrast from the cold graveyard. The graveyard colour palette is blues and it's very grey colours. This palette here is red, orange, and a bit of dark brown. He then goes on to say that my benefactor holds you in high esteem, so much so that he decided to leave your name at the scene to see if you could work out this crime. William is impressed with Sherlock. He did definitely seem impressed on the boat. We know that he's left his name at the scene to try testing Sherlock. Let's talk about music. I don't have a musical theory or anything, but I do know enough about music to know when something's doing something like this. The instrument we are hearing is a violin, and you are hearing the bow skidding on purpose. I can't tell you what that actually is. I believe it is like a bow bounce or a skid. They're doing it on purpose. And the result is we get a very twisted, disjointed chromatic scale. And it's just a really broken scale as it goes up. And the music is broken. The situation is twisted. Everything is really twisted. And at this point, the music is climbing. Things are starting to build up. The tension is building. Is Sherlock going to kill another man? Sherlock says, if I kill you, I'm still a wanted man. Fred is going to come forward and make a testify for you to frame Hope, clear Sherlock. Thus, obviously, both the men are going to benefit. That is when the sequence pops. We know how much Moriarty the Patriot loves to do colour popping. This time, the eyes of the ravens pop out red. The ravens are the watchers. Fred on the roof is the watcher. This whole sequence is creepy because everybody is watching. All these eyes are fixed on the situation. The pressure is on. Sherlock is my boy, okay? If Sherlock is me, he's not going to kill no one. I knew he wouldn't immediately. There's a little visual cue that kind of gave me the idea that it wasn't going to go the way they were hoping. It is indeed a yellow filter. It's quite murky, but it is indeed a yellow filter. And yellow often being the colour you would associate with the idea of calm, a level head. We see Watson freak out and pull a gun to Sherlock. You can't do this. This is wrong. There is no going back if you do this. He's trying to be a voice of reason. Also, we get an insight in strong justice that Watson adheres to. camera angles and the music. Okay, first things first, the music now. We are doing the scale going back down. It's just the way the violin is played disjointedly. Again, that could be a little nod because Sherlock Holmes is supposed to be quite bad at violin. The way it's being played is to show you this sequence is broken. The camera angle. So the next sequence we get, Sherlock is at the side of the screen. Dutch angles, and obviously Dutch angles are used to show you that something is wrong, the situation is quite disjointed, you're a step away from reality, something is generally not quite right. It's a very extreme Dutch angle. It's just messed up. The whole situation, the twisted nature of the scene, it's just messed up, and we get to see Sherlock at an angle kind of really thinking about what he's got to do. Hope tries to appeal to Sherlock's mystery-loving nature, where he says, you need to do this because you want to know who created the ultimate mystery. You want to know the answer. And that is when the scene just builds up to a climax and we hear a gunshot. The gunshot scatters all of our watchers. The crows, the ravens all fly away. And we end on a Watson screaming, stop. Yes, indeed, Sherlock has shot the ground. The main theme starts to play naturally. Now it starts to flow a bit better because the situation, the tension has gone. We're starting to drop back down into a bit of a better flow. Sherlock, of course he wouldn't. Guys, he really wouldn't kill anyone. He's not that kind of person. I mean, he's a questionable person at times. And there is a fun line in the movies, which is, does your depravity know no bounds? And he even goes, no. He's not a cold-blood killer. He is not Moriarty, guys. He says that mysteries are not mysteries unless you solve them yourself. He doesn't want the answer simply handed to them. You can't enjoy something if somebody is just going to give you the answer. He doesn't want somebody to just go, hey, that's him, William Moriarty, right there, that him. He wants to figure it out himself. And I already think he's got a clue of who it is. Watson, man. Oh, Watson, my bean. Why? It's just really, did you really think that this blockhead, this weirdo could be a cold-blooded murderer? Throws himself at Sherlock and clings around his middle, and he starts begging for forgiveness. 100% that bond between these two is now 100% established. Really like that. And Fred leaves. Sherlock apologizes to Hope and says, I cannot grant your final wish, where he handcuffs him with the handcuffs that he took off himself. At the police station, Sherlock is swagger. He is a swaggers in. He barges in and he's just kind of like, hi everybody, let me introduce you to my friend. This is the killer. It's like, wow. Guys, this smile. I want to protect this smile. It's bad. I'm a Lewis fan. Sherlock. Sherlock is making it very difficult for me to stay focused on my boy Lewis. Oh, it's fine. I've got to be strong. And it's just the way he goes, I kept my promise, Lestrade. In case anybody had any doubts that Lestrade was the one who let me free, it was Lestrade. Thanks for dumping him back into it. William reads the newspaper the next day after. He says so he slipped away and he solved the case. And it is again Albert. Albert is the one who goes, I'm really impressed with his ability to separate the two crimes, to know that there were two crimes going on. We learn from William that his audition had the best result. They were testing Holmes's quality and would he resort to any means to achieve his own goal, which is essentially what they did. And the answer is no. He isn't like us. He won't stop at nothing just to get what it is he wants. He is worthy. Quick moment to appreciate my boy Lewis. You know, every so often if Lewis appears and I haven't seen him for a while, just deal with the random screenshot of Lewis, guys. I love him. From here, Sherlock will now take a role upon the stage. He will solve the crime dramas that we are staging on the streets of London. He is now going to use Sherlock to aid his plan. He will be the leading man that shines in the darkness. At this point, the piano starts to play, which is quite nice. A little kind of release as we are starting to drift our way out of this little story. We then get a really nice visual of a crow raven eye, and it sees Sherlock down below. It's colour popped because we've got the blue and the red. Sherlock is at the centre of the eye and he is being watched. Visualisation of the story that Sherlock is now under scrutiny. He is at the centre of everything that is about to go down. We end with a very nice little sequence of Watson writing in his diary he didn't get any sleep that night. The precious scene, guys. This precious bean. Watson puts a little jacket over the sleeping Holmes and he says that living here, I'm never going to have to actually find anything to write in my diary because life with Sherlock is always going to be an adventure with him. This is the start of something.
Watson's diary, it's titled A Study in Scarlet. So there we are. I said before I believed it was supposed to be their little nod to this book. They have basically covered the first chapter. I don't think they're covering the second chapter because it looks like we're now going back, and they did make some alterations to make the study fit with putting William into the story. A nice little note for you guys who haven't read the book: A Study in Scarlet is written with Watson playing the narrator. And what do we have right here? Watson has written in his own diary, from his own point of view, what happened in A Study of Scarlet. And it really is such a nice little nod and a little detail. It's attention to detail that these guys are really good at doing. So hats off to the team for doing, once again, being that on it with details. Their next chunk is going to be another two-parter, which should take us to episode 11. So we are running out of episodes. It is the Two Detectives Act 1. It's really been another amazing episode. An episode full of amazing reveals, amazing unexpected moments when I wasn't expecting to see the guy literally on top of the carriage. That was amazing. Fred, wow. Just wow, Fred. I really hope at some point, obviously we have got the second part of season 1 coming out in April. I hope we start getting some backstory into Moran, into Fred. I think it would be interesting to get a little lowdown on knowing who Fred is, because he is no ordinary person and nobody can parkour like that. Especially at the Victorian period. Parkour wasn't a thing. Fred, I've got my eye on you. You're spooky. I think Moran is sexy and Fred is spoopy. He's a spoopy boy, and I don't like it. But he is the cosplayer king. It is an amazing episode. The end sequence of Moriarty deciding to try putting Sherlock on the stage and making him work to his end goal is interesting, because it feels like he's trying to play him as a puppet. He's trying to obviously control the situation around him. So Sherlock will be dancing to the tune that Moriarty is playing for him. As I did make a little hint that I think something like this is what's going to slowly be the undoing for William. His main goal, obviously, is to change the way everybody thinks and spur that change in London. He wants to, set fire to London and rebuild the ashes and rebuild a better place. I think him getting really absorbed with Sherlock is going to be the undoing. Obviously, this episode, he almost slipped up. I mean, there were a few points where he could have had Fred. If Fred wasn't a little bit more quicker, he would have had Fred revealed in front of him. If there's anywhere he's going to start making mistakes, it's going to be the fact that he's trying to play Sherlock as well. And I don't think Sherlock's going to be as easily played as he's hoping he will be. So that is my theory for what I think is going to be the undoing. I love this anime to bits. I gush over it weekly. I know these videos are just me gushing for like 40 minutes of gushing about how much this anime is really, really good. I absolutely love it. And I really hope you guys too have just been impressed and astounded by what a masterpiece of an episode we have had. I love it to bits. I really can't wait to see this next chunk. Although it does mean that we've only really got 3 episodes left and I've got to then wait and bide my time until it comes back next year. But I do have an anime next season that might take the place and be able to fill a little gap whilst I'm waiting. But for that, you guys are going to have to check out the video, which goes up on the 10th. Make sure you guys are subscribed. If you have just found me, hello. I am Clockwork Noodles. I love talking about anime. I like tearing things apart, analysing things, and working out why an anime does what it does and why an anime is successful. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. Make sure you guys are staying safe and have a good one. Bye-bye, guys.